Hey guys, OCP Communications. Welcome to another review, this time of Frightmare. Frightmare is a 1974 film. It's also known as Cover Up. And it's directed by Pete Walker. Pete Walker also helped produce the film along with Tony Tenzer. He also wrote the movie along with a good friend of his, David McGilvray. And it stars Rupert Davies, Shelia Keith, Deborah Fairfax, Paul Greenwood, and Kim Butcher. It has a pretty solid soundtrack score by Stanley Myers, and some really solid cinematography by Peter Jessup. Now, I wasn't really that impressed by the editing by Robert C. Dearberg. I thought it was a little bit choppy. But overall, the film Frightmare, which is another movie that was sent to me by Adam Watson. Thanks, Adam, for sending this to me. I just thought was really not much of anything. I wouldn't say it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen. I disagree with its 6.3 rating on IMDb. I think that's way too high for a movie like this, but to each their own. I don't really think it's that particularly memorable. I don't think it's particularly that scary. I don't think it's particularly much of anything, to be honest. It's not something I hated. I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was a really awful movie. It just did not grab me. It didn't stick with me. It wasn't that memorable for me. And I particularly found it pretty dull and honestly quite a slog to sit through, to be honest. But I'm glad that Adam sent it to me. I mean, there was an interesting interview with the director on here. And, I'm willing to give anything, I like horror films, so I'm willing to give, a lot of things a chance. And I've heard about Pete Walker. I've seen the trailers for some of his other horror films, like House of Whipcord and The Flesh and Blood Show, which I haven't seen yet. And I heard this was his best. And I'm going to be honest, this is his best. That the rest of his stuff might not be that impressive. It's not. I think it's just this type of movie, the type of way it's set up, isn't my type of horror film. I like having a fast-paced, thrilling, fun, entertaining horror movie. And if I'm going to have a little bit of this slow sort of pace, then the plot should be unpredictable, or should at least keep my interest. And Frightmare did. I'll give it that. It kept my interest through the end, so it wasn't completely hopeless. But what I'm saying is keep my interest 100% of the time. There were moments that kept my interest in certain parts of the plot, with certain characters, but other parts I really wasn't that interested in because I saw them coming a mile away. So the whole idea with this crazy family or whatever, and the mother's going to lose it again, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that her daughter was going to be the troubled girl in the beginning of the movie, and I knew that she killed some guy. It really wasn't that surprising, and I think it's probably back in 1974, this might have been a little bit more shocking. It might have been a little bit more, something different. But in 2014, and I've seen so many different horror movies. I've seen like 103 slasher films from the 1980s alone. This really honestly doesn't do much to separate itself from the rest, except it's really slow pacing. It's decision to have more dialogue than honestly scenes of anything happening, and definitely a very dry, fairly boring horror movie. And I think that's because it seems like there wasn't a lot of attempt for any sort of levity. Pete Walker, from the interview on the DVD, seemed to have a lot of fun filming, shooting the movie, shooting the picture. But it didn't seem like he had but he doesn't like horror movies. He even said he doesn't like horror films. So he hasn't even seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he basically renamed this a terror picture. He says, I don't even like horror films, so I didn't make a horror movie. I made a terror picture. I'm like, no, you made a horror movie, and a horror movie that's really not much to run home about. But it might have been something big and grand and different back in the 70s. But even then, I'm sorry, I've seen stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre from the 70s. the Amicus horror anthology from this Amicus horror anthologies from the 70s, you know, Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror and Asylum, you know, Peter Cushing. To be honest, this story kind of felt like one of those anthology stories from Asylum, Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt that just drug on way too long. There's a lot of padding in terms of the running time, and it just becomes a slog waiting for something to happen. But anyway, the movie actually started out with some promise, I thought, with this black and white prologue, which I like that touch. You know, it was black and white. You know, instead of being straight up color, decided to be black and white and do something a little bit different there. And so I like that. I like the fact that it started with a black and white prologue at a carnival, and this guy goes in and leaves the carnival. He meets up with somebody at this house or something, and then you hear some noises. You hear somebody scream, I think, and then you pan back, and the guy is missing part of his head. Cheap effect, but you get the picture. And then you cut to a judge who's convicting this couple, played by Rupert Davies and Shelia Keith. Rupert Davies plays Edmund Yates, and Shelia Keith plays Dorothy Yates. But you don't see them on screen because they play the older couple, the older version of the couple, after they get released from this insane asylum 16 years later after their conviction. So they're convicted of murder and of insanity by this judge, and are sent to a mental institution, and they're going to stay there until they are rehabilitated, and until they are safe to come back to society. And they end up getting released 16 years later, and then live in an isolated farmhouse. And their daughter, played by Deborah Fairfax, their daughter Jackie, comes in and visits them at odd hours of the night, and brings her mother this mysterious parcel package, and you find out that the parcel package is actually these animal brains that she gets from a butcher, because her mother, the reason why she was sent to an insane asylum and the reason why her father went along with her is because her mother is some crazy woman who is a cannibal, and she's likes to eat people's brains. Now, you don't actually see her eat anybody's brains. You don't see anything like that. The film could have used that. It could have been a little bit more creepy that way. Could have had a really lot of shocks. Not saying this film doesn't have its fair share of creepy or a little bit unsettling moments, but I definitely do disagree with this review. Horror at its most dangerous and unsettling. I gotta be honest, like, I've seen a lot more unsettling and dangerous horror movies than Frightmare. It pretty much is by the book, by the paint by numbers horror. The only time it's a little bit different is maybe the idea of a kind old woman who is the killer, who is a psychopath, and who is a cannibal, who likes to eat people's brains. But you never see her eat anybody's brains, and the only time you see her kill anybody is some guy's already knocked out in a farmhouse, and she takes a drill to his head, but you don't see the drill penetrate. You just see blood splattering on her face while she's smiling and grinning maniacally. And I gotta be honest, Shelia Keith did a great job. She had a look of lunacy about her character that was really, really effective, and I definitely was creeped out by her performance. And overall, the performances all across the board, acting-wise, were pretty solid for a film like this. Rupert Davies, in his last film role before he passed away, as Edmund Yates, I thought he did a solid job as the husband of the woman he loves, who is relapsing now and is killing people again, and now he's got to try to choose between the woman he loves or his family, or his daughter. And I thought Edmund Yates did a good job performance-wise. Deborah Fairfax I liked as Jackie, and she was sort of the heroine in the film. Very beautiful woman, and strikingly beautiful British woman. And I liked her personality. I liked her character. And Paul Greenwood, I liked his performance as well as Graham, who's a psychiatrist. Now, that was an interesting sort of touch for this type of movie, to have a character like Graham, who's just a nice guy. He's a guy who wants to, maybe live the rest of his life with Jackie because he's in love with her. And he also wants to help her and help her daughter, Debbie, played by Kim Butcher, who's really kind of an obnoxious character, an obnoxious performance, but I think that's done on purpose, but still. And he wants to help Debbie, and in turn help Debbie help Jackie, and help the family, and give them some psychiatric help or whatever. And he delves deeper into their lives and finds out that Jackie's parents are the Yates, Edmund and Dorothy, who were sent to an insane asylum for, pretty much for Dorothy eating people's brains, and for Rupert Davies' character Edmund Yates for just going along with it. And he finds out they were released. They were deemed sane, and so this becomes sort of a tale where he's trying to help the family, and he ends up finding the horrible truth and ends up in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, I mean, he ends up at the right place, but at the wrong time. And I like that character, and I like the story arc that dealt with him, sort of mystery element, him trying to uncover the past of the Yates family, and trying to find out who the parents are of Debbie. Of course, he finds out that it's Edmund and Dorothy, and then by the time he finds that out, he's a little bit too late. But pretty much the movie, like, you had that opening, the prologue opening. The Yates get sent to the insane asylum. They get released. They live in an isolated farmhouse now. But really, you don't get any of that information about them being released until about 30 or 40 minutes into the film. I think it's like 25, maybe 30, actually. And this is a movie that's like 83 minutes long. I mean, on the Region 2 release, anyway. And US, it says 88 minutes, but it's a pretty short movie. But it didn't feel like it to me. It really did drag. And I think it was mainly there were some pacing issues. There really wasn't a lot of ingenious editing. There really wasn't a lot of any kind of... there was some good camera work by Pete Walker. A good nightmare sequence that he added after the screenplay was finished, actually. He added this dream sequence, which is one of the more effective scares of the film, where Jackie's having a nightmare and she's seeing her mother with these creepy red eyes, which I guess were originally contacts that were supposed to be worn by Christopher Lee in some of the Hammer Dracula films. And but they didn't fit his eyes, so they ended up repurposing them and using them to fit Shelia Keith. And she brings her daughter this parcel, and it's dripping blood. And then she wakes up, and I like the camera work where it spins. The camera does a 360 spin and zoom in on Deborah's face. And I thought, Deborah Fairfax's face, the character Jackie's face, and then she wakes up. That was a pretty, decent dream sequence. But then pretty much you don't have any sort of build up or anything really in the beginning. I mean, after the black and white prologue, you cut to a really obnoxious couple played by Edward Kalinski as Alec and Kim Butcher as Debbie. And Debbie is just really obnoxious, 15-year-old brat, hanging out with this asshole biker guy. They go to a bar, and she asks for, a drink from the bartender. He realizes she's underage and refuses. She acts like pretty much a bitch, and gets her boyfriend to threaten him. They get tossed out of the bar, and to make matters worse, that's not enough. I mean, they meet up with the bartender later, beat the shit out of him. And then she ends up staying back while the cops are coming, and the biker guy Alec and the rest of his buddy cronies drive away. and she stays back, and I know what she did. I mean, it's really not very surprising when you find out that she is also a killer. Why else would she stay behind with this poor guy? And I mean, it really wasn't that much of a surprise at all. But anyway, so it's 1974 now, 16 years later, after 1957, because that's what happened. She's a cannibal. Dorothy Yates' character killed and partially ate 6 people in 1957. Now it's 1974. It seems that Dorothy's had a severe relapse. She secretly lures lonely young people to her home, promising tea and a tarot card reading, only with the session ending with violent murder and a feast. But you don't really see any feast. You don't see any feast. You see no feasts at all. Jackie, Edmund's daughter by a previous marriage, began to suspect her stepmother, Dorothy, rather early in the film, and juggles her family ties while at the same time trying to control her stepsister, Debbie, played by Kim Butcher, Dorothy's actual daughter, and that she and Edmund had shortly before being committed to the asylum. Debbie rides with a violent bike gang and has apparently inherited her mom's appetite for human flesh herself. Debbie became involved in a fight with her boyfriend, her barman, like I mentioned earlier, after closing time. The bank leave when they were spotted by customers, so Debbie hid the body in a car shelter before the police arrived. Debbie had severe arguments with Jackie about where Jackie goes at night. She learns that Jackie has been visiting her parents in a secluded farmhouse. Debbie finds out where they live, and she and her boyfriend Alec, flee to the countryside home to be reunited with their mom and dad. With her mom and dad, not his. And they are family in and plot against Jackie, who kept Debbie from them. And when all throughout the film, there's cut with some murder scenes. And they were all right, where Shelia Keith kills this poor woman with like a fireplace poker. Well, you don't see anything penetrate. You just see this crazy look on her face. She grabs a poker. The woman's like, they zoom in on the woman's face up against the wall, and blood pours out of her lips. That's pretty much it. Like I mentioned earlier, there's the death scene where the drill. The thing with the drill on here, which this cover art is ridiculous. This looks nothing like Shelia Keith, and this looks like a dude in drag. This looks like Beef. This looks like Garrett Graham for Phantom of the Paradise. Am I the only one? That looks like Beef. We want beef. We want beef. That looks like Beef from Phantom of the Paradise. It does not look like a woman. And if it is a woman, it's the ugliest woman I've ever seen. And Shelia Keith is not that ugly. And also, you have this. He looks like Beef from Phantom of the Paradise. And also, it almost looks like maybe is this supposed to be Rupert Davies? Rupert Davies isn't the killer. This cover art is. I always thought it was. I always remember this cover art because I'm like, does not look like who is this supposed to be? Because it sure as hell isn't Shelia Keith. So anyway, but yeah, that stuff with the drill, it's a lot of aftermath stuff. Like there's a guy who's already passed out dead or already dead in a farmhouse, and she takes the drill, drills through his head, and then blood splatters on her face, and she smiles. That's about it. There's one where the Alec guy, he comes in the farmhouse near the end, and he gets stabbed with a pitchfork, but you don't see anything. She just moves the pitchfork, and he covers his face, and there's already blood on it. And then he dies. You find out that the parcels that Jackie's character were sending her were actually fake. They weren't real human brains, because she's trying to appease her mother, and then the ending of the film I did not like. It was pretty much Paul Greenwood goes in, Graham, a character I like, goes in to try to investigate, to try to see if his suspicions are true that maybe Shelia Keith's character has had a relapse. Goes in to get his fortune read by her, and she realizes that he's lying, and she gets mad at him. And then Debbie shows up, and he's trying to help her, but then she turns on him, and pretty much he dies. He gets killed. You don't see him get killed, but you pretty much just see him already dead, tied to a table. And when Jackie comes in to come look for him. She finds him there tied to a table, dead. She screams in horror, and then her mother and her sister basically kill her. And that's it. I mean, and then the father just stands there and does nothing, and just has a look on his face like, ah, because he believes everything that Debbie said. Because she lied and said that Jackie was, told her about her real parents, which is bullshit. She didn't tell her anything. And then the movie pretty much ends with a freeze frame of the Rupert Davies' face, while you have the audio from the judge in the background who says that they will be kept locked up in an insane asylum, will not be released until they are fit for society. Fit for society, like, oh, echo, 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 political message. It was just kind of like, really, do we need to end it like that? I mean, I understand, yeah. I mean, basically what it was, this movie ends with like a giant bitch slap to the mental health, facilities and so forth. Just mental health. The crazy people are always crazy. There's no rehabilitation. And I understand, yes, some people are, but it's just, I mean, the ending was just one of those typical depressing, everybody dies, or anybody that you like dies horror film endings. And I don't prefer those, to be honest. Jackie gets killed by her own mother and her fucked up stepsister, and then her stepfather, or her, actually, I think it's her stepfather. It's not really her father, but her stepfather, is the only father she has, just does nothing. And then a love of her life, Graham, gets killed. And so the only characters I like in the film die. So, I mean, because I don't give a shit about Debbie. She's a bitch. Shelia Keith's a crazy old bat. And Rupert Davies does nothing. And he's a good actor. He does a good job performance-wise, but he does nothing to help, his stepdaughter. And he just sits there dawdling around, just completely clueless, letting Shelia Keith continually kill people again. And just because I love her, it's like, well, so what? I'm sorry, if I love somebody and the woman I marry is fucking killing people and eating them, I'm not going to be like, oh, I love you so much. I'm going to continue to loving you, even though you're some psychotic, crazy bitch who's eating people. No! As soon as I found that out, I would get my ass out of the house, I would call the police, and your ass would be in jail. Because I'd be fearing for my own safety, let alone the safety of others. Oh, love is blind. Bullshit, love isn't that blind. But anyway, I really don't know what else to say about Frightmare, except there really isn't much going for it. It's a very slow pace. It's an overabundance of dialogue. It's pretty much a really talky horror film. There's a majority of the running time is just dialogue and talking and talking and more talking. And the actual horror sequences are very short and very few and far between. And when they are there, they're effective. I'll give them that. They're effective. Shelia Keith is an effective psycho. And the cinematography is really, really solid by Peter Jessup. And, the performances acting-wise are pretty good. But is this really a movie I'd watch again? No, I wouldn't. Because it has a terrible ending, in my opinion. It has a shitty ending, which is just a political statement about, mental health rehabilitation is hopeless, which I think is a sleazy way to end your movie. And the critics are right. And it's not particularly... there's not much to recommend it for. I don't understand the praise it gets. I don't get it. It's fine if you like it, though. It's fine if you enjoy Frightmare. To each their own. I will give it this. It's a lot better than the other Frightmare, which is also known as a horror star, which is this steaming pile of shit. This isn't really the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's not something that I'd ever watch again. But I still keep it as my collections. Part of my collection series was a gift from Adam Watson. And I'm so glad I watched it once. It's just not, it just wasn't much of anything for me, personally. So, I really don't know what to say about Frightmare, because it was a rate out of 5 stars. I'm gonna give it 2. I'm gonna give it 2 out of 5. You know, 1 is for the acting performances by the rest of the cast, and 2 is the other star is a combination of the score, which I liked all right, and the cinematography, and some of the creepy sequences like the nightmare scene and so forth. But other than that, it's not really that chilling. It's not really that thrilling. It's not really that exciting. It's not really that scary. And it's not really entertaining. And that's the main thing. I just was bored most of the time when I was watching this. But anyway, I really don't know what to say about Frightmare, except thanks for watching my review. And I will see you guys later. See ya.